welcome to the 8th episode of Surprisingly Even. My name is Judith, and this podcast is about knitting, which is my hobby and favorite thing to do. I live and knit in Toronto, Canada, and can be found on Ravelry as Judith and Julia. Warmest greetings to my returning viewers. You guys are awesome, and your continued interest and support is greatly appreciated. And if you are new to this podcast, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to my knitting world. Please make yourselves comfortable. Those of you who have been following this podcast may have noticed that I was kind of MIA for the last 3 or 4 weeks, which is a big break for me given that I used to record on a weekly basis. So I feel like I have some explaining to do. So what's my excuse? Life kind of took over. I had to deal with some pretty big changes in my career, which is not all bad. In fact, it's actually all good and very exciting. But as any major transition in life, it could be quite stressful and hectic. So this was the last few weeks, which left me with very little time or even mental space to record a podcast or be creative in general. And as any time of turbulence in life, it's always an opportunity to step back and take a look and learn some lessons from the experiences. And I will leave some time at the end to talk a bit more about what I may have learned about myself and others that pertains to knitting. So if you're curious about that, please stick till the end. And now I would like to proceed with the knitting content. As always, we will start with garments, and in the garments department we have a finished object. Those of you who have watched the last few episodes may realize what it is. In fact, I am wearing it, and this is my soiree pullover, which I made out of Yuck Singles yarn by Woolbarn. This was knit on 2 75mm needles, and it took me some time to finish, even though I did make a really excellent progress when I first started it, but then things kind of slowed down. But now it's all done and I'm very pleased with the result. So let me just show it to you in all its glory. This is how it looks like. I'm very pleased with the fit, even though it may not be as boxy or oversized as the pattern probably intended. I feel that this kind of shape or this kind of fit is flattering on my body type. I really like how this yarn feels against the skin. So I did make a few modifications. Now, before I sit down, I wanted to show you the bottom of the pullover, because at some point it felt like I spent more time working on the finishing of the edge more than it took me to complete the entire pullover. So this is how it looks like. No major visible problem with the curling. And now that I'm going to sit down, let me tell you what I did there. This is my favorite part of the whole pattern. I'm not sure what this stitch is called, but it is really pleasing. It has very pleasing texture, beyond squishy. Let me tell you about struggles with the finishing the bottom edge. As I mentioned before, there was a major curling going on at the bottom of this pullover, which is a very common issue with stockinette stitch. I tried several things to deal with the problem. My first thought was and because it's worked bottom up, I had to pick up stitches along the bottom and do something. Either my options were I-cord, ribbing, then seat stitch. I tried them all, wasn't happy with any one of those. So what I ended up doing was 2 rows of crochet across the bottom. Now, one thing that I realized is that the fact that this was knit bottom up and I had to pick up stitches made it kind of worse, because I'm not sure if this is about how I'm picking them up, but it kind of created this ridge on the inside that made the curling worse. So probably if I had to make another one of these, I would probably start with provisional cast on, and then try various finishes, seeing how it would work if I didn't have to pick up the stitches. So that's an idea. A single row of crochet also across the neck. I think these were the only major modification, apart from the sleeves, which I think are more snugglier than the pattern intended. And also at the bottom of the sleeves I did a few rows of seat stitch. I quite like how it looks. So yeah, this is my soiree. Really pleased with the result. I think this can be counted as a success. I might make another one in the future, just because I really enjoyed making this pattern. I'm beginning to realize that as much as I thought of myself as being what's it called? So there's a process knitter and there is a product knitter. I used to consider myself being a purely product knitter, just focusing on the end result, and sometimes at the expense of enjoying actually making something. But I realize now that as I have less and less time to knit, perhaps in the recent few weeks, it's more and more important to me to have a good time while I'm doing that. So this pullover was one of those examples of patterns that I really actually enjoyed making. And I think it's kind of indicative of the types of patterns I enjoy making, which is I like making things in the round. I like having a mix of meditative kind of stockinette knitting with just enough interest, some action going on in the form of a pattern or, shaping to keep things interesting so that you don't fall into the black hole of endless stockinette. And this was kind of the best of both worlds. So yeah, this is soiree. Highly recommend it. As much as I had any doubts with regards to whether this yarn was going to work for the pattern, I think it worked brilliantly. And actually, this specific yarn, I noticed it was featured in the latest issue of the Lane magazine. I was thrilled seeing it there. I was like, yeah, I already used it. So. Okay, so this is the finished object for today, and we also have another project to talk about as far as garments are concerned, and this is my current whip, which is the Sunset Highway pullover. So let me just show you how it looks like, to take a break from my talking, and then I will tell you how it's been going. Again, a reminder, this is Skein. So this yarn is from Skein brand. It's all the way in Australia, which is literally the other side of the world. As of late, this brand is one of my top go-tos. I'm just in love with the quality of the yarn, with their color, with the customer service, the fact that they're so responsive, and so I'm definitely willing to wait, even though sometimes it takes a bit longer to get stuff from them because it's so far away from where I live, but it's definitely worth the wait. So these colors are called Graphite, this dark charcoal gradient. The yellow is Pollen. The very light coral is, I believe it's called Sherbet Fizz. And the main color is Woolshed. I believe the two favorite ones, if I had to choose, is this Pollen, just because as of late I really like yellow, and it has plenty of yellow in it. And Woolshed is absolutely gorgeous. It is this creamy beige with speckles of brown, and sometimes even a tiny bit of blue and burgundy, which may not be noticeable on camera, but I can definitely see it when I work with it. The only thing, I have to alternate skeins because one is visibly darker than the other, so this is what I'm doing. So let me talk a little bit about my experience with knitting this sweater so far. The yoke has been taking me forever. Main reason being is that I had to do it twice. So the first time I started it, I did check my gauge, and I selected the size in accordance with the notes in the pattern. The sweater is meant to be quite a bit oversized, so I picked the size, the number of stitches that would give me the right amount of ease, and I started knitting on it. And it was a slow go with the color work, because this specific yarn, as wonderful as it is, it's not meant for stranded color work. It's not one of those traditional rustic yarns that would create a cohesive fabric after you do a few rows of the chart. Because when you knit with those rustic yarns, the stitches tend to stay apart after, a certain amount of fabric has been created, and it's virtually like very, very difficult to make your floats too tight. So you don't even have to worry about that, because the stitches just stay in their places. You just carry the float along, and it's all going swimmingly. Not so much with this yarn, because it's a superwash. It has a bit of like springiness to it. Things just are very fluid, and I found myself in need to constantly pull stitches apart row after row to kind of make sure that my floats are not too tight and there was no puckering happening. So yeah, that was a challenge. The first time I started, I got to about here and I realized that it looks kind of big. I mean, bigger than I thought it should be. And I was like, yeah, but you know, it's taken me a while and it's a lot of work, this color work piece, so there's no way I'm going to unravel it. So it's meant to be oversized. Maybe it will be more oversized than I had envisioned, but I'm just gonna keep going. And by the time I got to this point with my first attempt, I tried it on again. I realized that it was just way too big, like way out of my comfort zone. And as much as it would pain me to unravel what I had accomplished, I thought it would be even more painful to finish a sweater and never really enjoy wearing it. So I made a tough decision. I unraveled almost entirely completed yoke and I started again. Now I cast on the number of stitches for the second smallest size, but then I adjusted the number of increases after the ribbing was done to arrive at the number of stitches for the smallest size for the yoke portion of the pullover. First time I knitted, I found that it was maybe because I was trying to deliberately knit loosely to avoid puckering or, you know, floats that would be too tight. My colorwork fabric was actually looked visibly looser, or there was a visible difference in gauge between the stockinette portion and colorwork. So what I ended up doing this time around, I went down a needle size for the colorwork portion, even though it seems to be counterintuitive because majority of the population, at least from what I'm reading on forums and in pattern instructions, would actually go a needle size up for the colorwork. I went the other way. I'm very happy now about the decision that I made to unravel the yoke because I tried it on and it fits really, really well. Some modifications I've been making to the pattern as I've been going. I didn't do as many short rows in the back as was specified in the pattern, and the other important change that I made, because I cast on stitches for the smallest size and my row gauge was probably a bit off since I was using smaller size needles, smallest size. So before I separated the body and sleeves, I knit a bit longer after the color work portion was finished. And I added these increases here, like raglan-like increases, to make sure that before I split the body and sleeves, I had a good amount of stitches across the chest to give me just the right amount of ease, which the smallest size of this pullover wouldn't have provided for me. So again, increases in very much raglan-like manner, and I increased about 6 or 7 times. So that means that 6 or 7 times 4 or 8 stitches per increase round, and I was increasing every other round as you would have done in a standard kind of raglan top-down construction. So split body and sleeves, it's growing much faster now that I'm done with color work. I'm hoping to be done with it relatively soon. One potential area of concern is that this is all the yarn I have of the main color. I think I consulted yarn requirements in the pattern. I need to go back and check, but I mean, this is all I ordered, so I hope this will be enough. There could be a round of yarn chicken game coming up in my future. One thing that may help with that is that sleeves, the pattern for this has a bit of a color work on the sleeves. So if I'm getting really short, I may just, you know, do something creative and do more of the color work that's required or that's called for in the pattern, just to make sure my sleeves will be long enough. So yeah, again, really, really happy with the progress, even though it's taken me forever, but I think it's gonna be definitely worth it. And look at these colors. I really, really like how they work together. It's actually worked really well how subtle the difference is between these two colors, because there's enough drama going on with this yoke design without having to resort to some bright or crazy speckles. I think this is just the right amount of color differential that's needed. So let's talk about future plans in the garments department. If you watched the last few episodes, you may recall that I was planning to make a VD. I should really learn how to pronounce the name of this pattern correctly. It's a top-down V-neck pullover from the latest Woolfolk collection. I already have a yarn for it, which is beautiful. I think the colorway is called Milk Glass, and it's from Skein as well, but it may be a sport weight. So yeah, as you may have guessed from this introduction, that plan has changed. Now I'm planning to work on something else. It's the latest pattern from Andrea Maury called Comfort Fade. Anyway, it's a fade cardigan that she recently released, and I pretty much bought the pattern right as I saw it. And I already ordered the yarn, and I even already received it. So let me show it to you, even though I was planning to cover it in the treasure segment, but today I'm giving myself a free pass. This is going to be a freeform episode, so let me show it to you right now. These are the colors that I'm planning to use for the fade cardigan. Let me just go through them one by one. This is again from Skein, Australia. I better show it this way. And the base is called MCNDK, which is 80% merino, 8% superwash merino, 10% cashmere, 10% nylon. And this is a DK weight, as the label indicates. And the colors are, this is Metropolis. It's really nice blue purple. And this is called Jersey. Very nice gradient gray. The third color is Fallow, and it looks greener on the camera. I'm just noticing than it is in real life. So this kind of teal color is more muted. And the fourth one, probably my favorite one of the lot, is Seaboard. So this is how these colors are looking together, and I'm really happy with how they're working with each other. So I think this sequence would be something like this. In the pattern, one color is more like prominent than the other. So anyway, the yarn requirements ask of more for one of these colors, and in my case it's going to be Fallow. So I have more of this than of the rest of them. I can't tell you how excited I am about starting on this project, so this will be a good motivation to finish the Sunset Highway pullover sooner rather than later. And there was also another development related to the faded cardi pattern. So after I selected my color combination and I ordered the yarn from Skein that I just showed to you, Skein brand, actually they came up with their own combos for this specific pattern, and after I saw them, I just could not resist, and I may have, oh, the hell with it. I actually did order another set of yarn for the faded cardi from Skein. It hasn't arrived yet, but it looks very likely that there will be two fade cardigans in my near future, and I'm just telling this to you so that you can brace yourselves for hearing about fade cardigan for some time on this podcast. So this was the update for garments, both past, present, and future. And now, as it is already an established kind of sequence of events, where I'm going to move on to talk about shawls. So let's just do a quick recap of history, what transpired on the last episode. I believe I was working on a homage pattern from Amaristo magazine using some lavender gray yarn from my stash, and that was supposed to be a belated birthday gift from my sister. So I was having some challenges with that specific pattern, was considering unraveling the work in progress. So an update on that project is resting in peace. It was frogged, and I even started on the second iteration. My backup plan for that yarn to produce a scarf for my sister was to use a stone crop pattern by Jared Flood. I did start on it. I didn't go very far, but I just realized I wasn't really happy with how it was coming out. It didn't look right. It didn't feel right. So that's been frogged as well. And I arrived to the conclusion that that specific yarn, it just does not want to be a scarf or a shawl. I think what it wants to be is garment and something with garter in it. And I believe I already have a pattern in mind. But so I needed a backup plan for my sister's gift, because a promise is a promise. I promised to produce a scarf for her, and I shall keep this commitment. But while I was thinking about what I should be making for her instead of the frogged failed attempts, I decided to start on something that I had been planning to do for a long time ago, and this is the Time Trade Shawl by Caitlin Hunter. As you may recall, I got this specific kit in this colorway as a birthday gift from my very loving daughter Leia, and finally I got to knitting it, and here it is. So I did manage to make quite a bit of progress. So I'm now finishing the gradient set stripes. So this pink is the last of the 5 gradient minis that was included in the kit, and I'm starting to knit with one of the two main colors. So I must say I'm very excited about things getting more interesting in this shawl color-wise, because I kind of did not really enjoy knitting the gradient, but now things are getting more exciting. So starting with this one, and then we'll proceed with this color, which is probably my favorite of all of them. And just because it is my favorite, I'm going to mention again what it is. This is a Primrose yarn base called Adelaide, and the color is called Hermione. And it's just one of those colors that makes you happy just by looking at it. It has the most beautiful pink and some very happy chartreusey greens and browns, and just what's not to like, right? So these two are coming into play next. I just have one more stripe of this pink finish, and then from that point on it would just be knitting with these two colors. It's coming out beautiful, and because I already knit this once, learned some lessons from the first time I made it, so this time I'm using stitch markers to separate or to demark lace repeats, because I was getting thrown off and confused first time I knit it, and I ended up in quite a bit of trouble, but no problem whatsoever this time around. Things are going swimmingly, and I can't wait to finish and wear it, because I think it's going to be beautiful, and it's going to go really well with quite a few things in my wardrobe, including this sweater actually, that I'm looking at it now. So yeah, one thing I'm not looking forward to is to deal with all these ends, which is unfortunate, but unfortunately necessary byproduct of all this beautiful striping. So first time I did it, I believe I even counted the number of these ends that I had to mend, and it was more than 50. So that's okay, I'll just have to bite the bullet and do it. So this is my Time Trade shawl, work in progress. And as far as future plans go in the shawls department, my top priority now, actually I have two, first is to actually produce that scarf for my sister that I promised, and I believe I already have a plan for that. But before I tell you about what I'm actually going to make, I'm going to show you what I thought of making. And this pattern is included in the latest issue of the Making magazine, and it's called Reina Shawl. It's by Andrea Mori, and this beautiful combination of 2 shades of Brooklyn Tweed Loft that go into it, lighter and darker gray, and I simply love it. I have never knit with Brooklyn Tweed Loft before, and I thought it would be a great opportunity for me to try the yarn. I can definitely see the appeal, and in my mind, everybody who is calling themselves a serious knitter, it should be on the bucket list for everyone to try and knit with this iconic yarn. So I thought this is a perfect opportunity for me to finally get the experience. But then I realized that I would have to buy 6 skeins of loft. I've gone to, or I inquired with some of my local yarn stores, and unfortunately, or should I say fortunately, none of them had the right colors and the right amounts. So then I thought my first priority should be knitting from my stash, and I looked at my stash. It didn't have really any exciting gray yarn that would just sit there. But then something caught my eye, and I thought it would be a great idea for a scarf for my sister. I'm going to show it to you. So And as you may notice, it's not gray at all. It's actually the opposite of gray, if such thing exists. Actually, I'm seeing on camera and it seems very blue, this yarn, but in real life it's actually a very dramatic dark purple, almost kind of gothic, with a lot of even darker purple included in it. So this is, I can tell you what this is. This is yarn called Wisp by Handmaiden, and the colorway is called Violet. I got this from Romney Wools in Toronto, and this is my second kind of time that I would be working with it. It's a really great deal in terms of value for money. So it's composed of 70% fine kid mohair, 10% wool, and 20% nylon. And this is 800 meters and cost me only $40. I already made 2 scarves out of this for my daughter last year. Very different colorway. It was rather delicate pink gradient or variegated pink, very subtle variegation. What I remember from working with this yarn, this was the warmest yarn I ever worked with. While I had this scarf on my knees while I was working on it, it felt like I had a radiator there or something. So for something so light to be so warm, I think it's quite remarkable. But maybe it's because I haven't worked enough with mohair, and maybe that's what mohair is, or that's what mohair does. So I showed this to my sister because I wanted to run this change in plans by her before I would dive into this, and she actually was really excited. She loved the color, and I said, listen, your wardrobe is already so gray, I think you need something that's not. She excitedly agreed, and this is what she's gonna get. Like, not this, the scarf made out of this. And I already have a pattern in mind. It's again coming from the same issue of Amirisu magazine that the homage pattern was from. I can't recall now what the pattern is called, but I will pop in the picture right here. And the noise that you can hear right now is coming from my dogs, who are getting excited about something outside. Okay, so these are the shawls, the work in progress and future plans. Next, we are going to talk about, what are we going to talk about? Socks. Actually, in the socks, I did not bring my whip, but it's the same pair that I worked on last time we spoke. It's Hermione Everyday stitch pattern. Which I'm making from sock yarn by Lichens and Lace, which are Canadian dyer. The colorway I'm using is called Shroom, which is really, really nice. I'm actually considering making a garment out of the same color. So I'm just at the point where I'm about to start the heels, and admittedly that specific project hasn't been getting nearly enough love. Maybe I should make a point and just finish it, because I do enjoy wearing hand knit socks, and I do get a lot of requests. So it's a very, very, one of those really, really useful objects. It's just that there's so much more interesting stuff going on, like for me personally, in my kind of knitting situation, between the shawls and the garments and all the speckles going on. So I kind of haven't been able to bring myself to finishing those socks and start a new pair, but I probably should. But next time we talk, I promise those socks, if they wouldn't be finished, but at the very least they would have heels in them. So that's a commitment that I'm willing to take on. And other areas, I'm not currently working on any hats. I did finish the antler hat that I was working on last time we spoke, and the tweedy blue yarn. So I made that hat from Aaron Moore yarn by the Fiber Company. Unfortunately, I can't show it to you because it has already gone to its intended recipient, and I'm happy to report that he loved the result, and I see him wearing it every day, so which gives me great pleasure. I do have a couple of ideas of hats I want to work on next, but I'm not going to mention those now just because I haven't quite made up my mind. Hopefully next time we talk, we'll have started on at least one of them. Actually, on only one of them, because as you know, my rule is one of each. In mittens, nothing currently in progress. I did not end up making the latest or the second latest pattern from the Selbo Mittens Club, just because the stitch count was way too big for me. But because I already had gotten the yarn for it, I had decided that I'm going to make a pair of mittens again from the latest issue of Making magazine, and let me just find it. So these are the mittens that I'm going to make. They're called Lines mittens, which is really fitting with the name of this issue of the magazine. It's called Lines. I really like how modern, cool these look, and I believe they come in different sizes. The pattern comes in different sizes, which is always great. And the yarn I have is actually very similar to what they're showing. Mine is like dark teal and very light gray. So I'm gonna be casting these on soon. And last but not least, we're gonna talk about the blanket. This is always the crowd pleaser. And actually, a lot of people are asking me, what is about the blanket? Don't worry, people, the blanket's still getting the love. So I'm currently working on this row, and as you may remember, I'm growing it in a diagonal kind of manner rather than horizontal. So I was working on this square, which is one of minis I got from my friend Vanessa. Then I also added this one. This is the yarn is from Knit Picks. It's their straw tweed. I have a pair of socks made in this one. These two colors are again from Vanessa. No, I should be talking about this one. This one is again from Vanessa, and she's like the main sponsor of this blanket. And this one that's currently in progress is one of the minis I got from Nora George. It's from her Dracula themed set of minis, and it does feel sometimes when I knit on the yarn that it's kind of almost kind of blood stained. This is gorgeous, gorgeous red. So yeah, the blanket is growing, and gives me a lot of pleasure just to look at all these different colors. And it's even so much more meaningful when you know where the yarns came from, who gave those to you. You can think about finished objects. Oh, this is a pair of socks that I have. This is Fate sweater. This is another pair of socks. So this is a really, really one of my favorite projects ever. I saw Vanessa a week ago, and she gave me another beautiful batch of minis. So thank you, dear. I will put those to excellent use. They will all make an appearance in this blanket, and probably the next blanket that I will have to start, just because I cannot waste any of the precious yarn that I got to feed this project. Started thinking about what would be a good size, because at some point it has to be finished. So at this point I'm thinking, counting in squares, probably like 15 by 20 would be a good meaningful size for this blanket, which would mean that it would consist of 300 squares, which is not a small number. I probably should count on how many I have so far. Maybe I'll report on it next time. So this is all the update on the work I have completed or that's currently in flight. And next, as always, I'm going to talk about treasure. I have some exciting updates in the treasure department. In the treasure department, first, as you may notice, and I don't recall if I already had this book last time we spoke, but if you hadn't, this is an excellent addition to my knitting library, and it's the latest issue of my Making magazine, of which I'm a proud subscriber, and I already have my eye on a couple of patterns from this that I will be making. Another, in yarn-wise, I fell kind of a victim to Thanksgiving sale, Canadian Thanksgiving sale by one of my favorite yarn shops in Toronto, Units. So when I got the email, I just couldn't resist. There was a really good discount, and I bought 2 skeins of Shibui Silk Cloud. This is a yarn I had my eye on for quite some time. I heard from many people that if I want to knit with a really, really good quality mohair silk mix, that Shibui Cloud should be at the top of my list. And this is 40% silk, 60% kid mohair, and the color is called Mineral. I bought these 2 with a specific project in mind, and that project it's a shawl pattern from the latest issue of Lane magazine, and it's this one. It's called Fallen Leaves, and it's a shawl by Justina Larkowska. So it combines two different yarns. It's a merino single and mohair silk, as you may have guessed. So I'm going to make this shawl, I'm going to use this yarn Silk Cloud by Shibui, and I'm going to combine it with the yarn that I've shown to you before. And this is a merino single that I hand dyed with my two own hands when I took a yarn dyeing class at Units as well in Toronto. If I had to name this colorway, I would have probably called it Tiger Lily, just because it reminds me of tiger lily flowers. So these two are going to be combined to make the Fallen Leaves shawl, and I think it should work beautifully together. So another shawl object to add to my ever-growing queue, which I'm also really excited about. I also bought a single skein of this yarn from Hedgehog Fibers. It's called Graphite. The colorway is called Graphite, and I was looking for variegated kind of black, and that's exactly what it is. Even though in some light people ask me, is it purple? But I think it's definitely more black than purple. And you may ask, but Judith, why do you need a single skein of black yarn? And I will tell you exactly why. I do have a plan in mind. So this is going to be part of my second exploration station shawl, and it's going to be a Dracula themed exploration station shawl. And these are the 4 colors that are going to go in it. So here is the combo. The idea of this shawl came from my very creative offspring, as she was editing my last episode where I was showing this skein of Dracula colorway from Nora George, and I was lamenting the fact that I didn't know what to do with it, as gorgeous as it is. She said, I have an idea, why don't you make me a Dracula themed exploration station shawl? I said, what a wonderful thought. So this is exactly what it's going to be. So as you can see, I have quite a few very exciting shawl projects competing for my attention in my queue. It will be such a flip of a coin, but we'll see which one wins and is going on my needles right after I'm casting off the Time Trades shawl. So these are pretty much all the updates in the treasure department I wanted to share with you today. I also bought another yarn from Units as part of that Thanksgiving sale extravaganza, but unfortunately I don't have it with me at the cottage this weekend, so I'll have to show it to you next week. So this is the end of the content that I had to cover for today, and as promised, I'm going to briefly talk now about the lessons I learned from the last few weeks of a bit of a turbulent situation that I had experienced with my career changes that relate to knitting. So the first thing I learned was that I have a small but very dedicated audience on this podcast, because when I didn't post an episode for a couple of weeks, I got questions from a few of you, what's going on? Did you post the episode? Did I miss the notification? And I was like, no, unfortunately, I just haven't been up to it, because, you know, life kind of came at me too fast, and I didn't have the time or the opportunity to record. But it made me realize that some people take interest and enjoy in actually consuming what I do. Mixed feelings about that. First, it gave me great pleasure, because I do enjoy making these podcasts, and it's really great to know that someone out there enjoys watching them. And the second feeling that I had, it made me feel incredibly guilty for not being able to keep up with this. Some people may not see it as a big, but it's significant commitment. So I promise to do better in the future and not let kind of life stay in the way of what's important. So here I am back with you sharing this episode. And the second lesson I learned is that in order for me to be creative, I have to be in a certain state of mind. Some people, especially people who don't knit, but maybe some knitters as well, they view knitting as that meditative kind of hobby that is a way to relax and a way to compose oneself and a way to comfort oneself and in a time of difficulty. So what I found was that when I'm stressed or when I'm preoccupied with something that kind of is taking over my life, I have a hard time being creative or wanting to be creative, or even anything that I end up producing in such a state. It's rarely a success, or rarely does it give me pleasure or good results. So as much as knitting kind of helps me to bring some tranquility and balance, I already have to be what I realized that I already have to be somewhat balanced in order to enjoy my knitting. And I'm not sure if this is the case for everyone, but definitely the case for me. So just given the content of this episode, I've been away not podcasting for 3 or 4 weeks. You would have expected I would have completed mountains of stuff, and yet very little has been done. But this was the case of quality over quantity, and I'm definitely happy with the decisions and the choices I made knitting-wise during this period of time. And I hope that in the future I will kind of take this lesson and do something with it. Try to plan my time and allocate my resources better. So this is it. That's all I wanted to talk to you about today. As always, I want to wish you a great week and happy knitting or whatever else you're enjoying to do. And I hope to talk to you again soon.